The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes, they were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided the property between them. A few days later, that younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered that property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. He would have gladly filled himself with those pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So the son went off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on, and the slave replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' That brother became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' The father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Have you ever lost something? Keys, sunglasses, a wallet, a purse, your mind? Seeing if you're awake. What does it feel like when or if you ever find those things again? I mean, it's a good feeling, right? It's that feeling of relief. That same kind of feeling you have if you find that crumpled up $10 or $20 bill in some pair of pants or a coat you haven't worn in a while. How about if you forget where you parked your car and have to spend way too long walking around until you find it again? Or if your dog or cat gets loose and it seems like they're nowhere to be found? Or, I know you all are aware that Charlotte is of that age that she's walking now, so we've had plenty of those moments just in our house of her quietly disappearing to some remote corner of the room with a toy or book, giving us enough panic to run up and down the house from room to room until we find her. You know, I think I've figured out why they invented those child leashes. May not be as bad of an idea as I first thought. I imagine that we've all had some moments of panic where something very important to us has been lost. But I also hope we've had those moments where what's lost is found, Because as we know, these are moments of joy and hope and thanksgiving. What about, though, those times where we are the ones who's lost? Maybe we've missed a turn or made a wrong turn, or we're in a totally unfamiliar place, and we're certainly not going to ask for directions. Maybe we've gotten separated from those we're with, whether in the crowd or in traffic, and we start panicking until we can get reunited. Maybe we felt separated from God, or have had those moments where we thought God wasn't near or didn't care or actually let that bad stuff happen to us or our loved ones. Our anger and frustration can draw us away from God, or we get angry and frustrated at God, which is okay. It happens. Because God is big enough to handle those feelings that we have and actually stays with us to see us through them. So in that same vein, then, when we have been found, or when we've found our way, or when we've found reconciliation with God, we can be nothing but joy-filled and thankful. It's such a great image to think of God in that way, isn't it? Today, on the fourth Sunday in Lent, we hear Jesus tell the story of what we call the Prodigal Son. We hear about the one who took what was not yet his, went and squandered it away in extravagant and probably not so responsible living, who hits rock bottom and comes crawling back home only to be greeted with a party. In what seems like almost a reward for blowing his whole inheritance, this son gets the finest robe to put on, and a ring placed on his finger, and sandals on his feet. Literally the royal treatment. All before the fatted calf is butchered and the music, dancing, feasting, and celebration begin. All while us, and probably all the hearers of this story, are thinking, boy, I wish I could get rewarded like that. Well, actually. Well, okay, so for most of us, we typically side with the older son, right? We feel like we are the ones who have remained responsible and connected. We haven't asked for our inheritance early. We didn't run off and squander away everything in dissolute living. We've been working our rear ends off, obeying all that's been asked of us, and we don't even get a goat so that we can celebrate with our friends. I'd be miffed too if my father sent out the welcome wagon for someone like him without giving me a second thought. What gives? Right? Am I off base? Aren't there a whole bunch of times that we feel ignored and overlooked while it seems like others are getting the royal treatment? Or maybe we've had those times when we've been the lost one, off doing our own thing until we reach rock bottom and having to come back with our tail between our legs. And if that's ever happened, we know what reconciliation can feel like. We truly know what it means to be lost and then found. We know that power in being humbled. But I think there's something more here. There's always something more. I think our title today is a little limiting. The story that Jesus tells, we have historically been calling it the parable of the prodigal son, or the parable of the lost son. And yes, there is a prodigal or lost son in this story, but I think our focus gets a little misdirected when we simply read that title that's in so many of our Bibles before we read this story. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. If you happen to notice today in today's gospel reading, book of Luke, chapter 15, we started with verse 1. You heard it. We have tax collectors and sinners who are coming to hear Jesus. The Pharisees and scribes are like, how dare these tax collectors and sinners come to Jesus, and how dare he welcome them? And then we hear, so Jesus told them this parable. And then we skip 7 verses. Did you see that? It made me at first a little suspect as to which parable Jesus was telling them. But it was really, I think, for the sake of time that we simply skipped those parables that are titled the parable of the lost coin and the parable of the lost sheep. And we went right to the lost son. You probably recall in those parables that Jesus asks, which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing them, Losing one of them does not leave the 99 behind and go after the one that's lost. And when it's found, they call everyone together to rejoice. Or what woman, having lost one of her 10 coins, does not turn upside down the entire house until she finds it, and then again calls everyone together to rejoice? I mean, I think you can hear that all of these parables have a similar theme. Something's lost, and when it's found, there's rejoicing. The reason I think that these titles are misleading is because I think we gain more out of the parables when we focus less on the son and the brother or the sheep or the coin and focus more on the one who seeks out what is lost and celebrates it when it is found. I know in today's parable I get caught focusing on the brothers, pitting them against each other, figuring out which one that I'm acting like on that particular day, engaging my response to what's going on with each of them. I always overlook the father. I always read through the part where he actually granted the younger son part of the inheritance that he asked for. I miss the power of this father who in front of everyone does what no male in that culture would ever be caught doing, running up the road to meet and embrace and kiss this son whom he sees coming from so far away. He treats him like royalty and throws a huge celebration, and when his older son gets mad and refuses to come to the party, the father doesn't send a servant or order him to come in. The father goes outside himself to plead with this son to come inside and to share in this celebration and share in his love. Yes, Jesus uses this parable to remind us how wonderful it is to be found after we've been lost. He encourages us to know that we are not alone in feeling abandoned when it appears that others get special treatment over us. But he's also pointing to something bigger. He's pointing us to the God who will leave everything behind to seek out that one lost sheep. He's pointing to the God who turns everything upside down to find that one lost coin. He's pointing to the God who provides us with what we need, who comes running to us when we do an about-face in return, and who pleads with us when we want nothing to do with his love. Yes, we once were lost and have been found. We once were dead and are now alive. We once were stuck in the human ways of the world, but now, as Paul reminds us, we are a new creation through Christ Jesus. He says, everything old has passed away, everything has become new. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and has given us the ministry of reconciliation. It's through Christ that we've received God's great embrace and his deep, expansive love and compassion and forgiveness, which then we are called to share and live in that same way. We are the living examples of that love and that compassion and that forgiveness. As Paul says again, we are God's ambassadors to the world. It's that message that has been shown to and shared with us and that we are called to share with others. That message of reconciliation, that message of forgiveness, that message of hearing. It's okay. You are still loved. Thanks be to God. Amen.